Hello and welcome back, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife, and I am starting on these long form interviews of veterans, and today's show is no exception. It's the first one of those, and so I'm going to be sharing an excerpt from that long form interview with you from an amazing veteran, and his name is Brooks Kendrick. He's going to introduce himself in just a minute, so you'll get to know all about him then, and his experience getting into the military at a very young age, and some of the things that pitfalls and complications that he ran into that he wanted to share with people who are interested in joining the military so they can hopefully avoid those complications as well. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. All right, so this week I've got Brooks with me. Brooks, why don't you introduce yourself really quickly to everyone?
Okay. Yeah, my name is Brooks Kendrick. I guess the nature of the interview is for the military experience, so I guess I'll say a little bit about that. I did 6 years active duty as an infantryman in the Army, and then I did a couple years in the reserves. Um, and now I'm out, separated. And as far as personal life, I'm married. Um, I have no children yet, and right now, I'm actually getting involved in a local readiness group that was actually a group of veterans. A lot of them I used to serve with. So this is cool. This is timely. I'm excited to talk about it.
That's really exciting. Yeah, we've got to hit that too because I'd love to know more about what veterans are doing in the area. Um, okay, so why did you join the military?
I was actually just rearing to go, from I don't know, 12 to 15 years old. I was starting to get exposed to the possibility, the idea of joining the military. A lot of veterans have a similar thing, but I have, you kind of naturally look towards the people in your family who served. So my grandpa was in the Navy, and I had an uncle that was an Army Ranger, and when my other grandpa was in the Army National Guard and stuff. So as I was looking into and getting interested in the military, I started really trying to soak up everything I knew about my family's experience in the military. And I didn't actually get a lot from them. My grandpa, he would tell me a few stories from his Navy experience. My uncle wouldn't say anything about his Ranger experience. And then my other grandpa, I don't know if it was just so long ago, like when he was a really young man, but he never even mentioned it. I found a picture of him in uniform and asked him about it, and he gave me a couple sentences about it. So I would say the reason I joined was actually just a combination of really loving Boy Scouts. I got involved in a military youth program called Civil Air Patrol, and I was very active in that. I had a ton of good experiences there. So I was already wearing a uniform. I just feel like I've been wearing a uniform my whole life, as a Cub Scout, and then it just naturally became like the old BDU camo for the Civil Air Patrol, and I always had like a sharp haircut. My mom, even as a kid, was always treating me like a soldier. She'd give me missions, like my chores were missions, and I would have to come and report. So growing up, my mom was like always saying like, "That's a good report, soldier," and then she'd give me another task. Um, Having said that, when I was like 17 years old, I was at the time more focused on just wanting to become an adult, move on with my life, get on with the career, do what I've just been envisioning for so long, and I didn't even want to finish high school. I just wanted to go in, and so I enlisted at 17 before my senior year in high school, and of course with my parents' permission, and their terms were they were supportive, but their terms were that I would need to use what the Army at the time would call sabbatical, and I would go serve a mission for the LDS Church, and then I could go back to the Army afterwards. So that was the terms, but um, basically I was doing drills as a senior. I was going down to a fort in Ogden, Utah. So I would drive down there once a month to go, and I was a combat engineer or whatever. So I had not even gone to basic training, but I was like messing with C4 with all these combat veterans and stuff and sleeping with them in their barracks and I was really, I would say really naive and um innocent at the time. And uh that experience in and of itself was eye-opening, just training with these guys that had already been to war. A lot of the sergeants that I had there were in Iraq and Afghanistan already. And anyways, I finished my senior year, and then I decided to just now that I'm 18, I'm adult, I can make my own decisions. I decided to just go active duty. So I went into the recruiter, signed my own contract, and at the time I wanted to go do Rangers or something along those lines, and so I signed an infantry contract. And relatively soon, I went off to boot camp in Georgia, and it was really interesting because everyone was kind of expecting me to go serve a mission, which was normal in the church, to go serve a 2-year mission. But to me, it felt like I was going on a mission. I knew that by joining the infantry at the time, I would absolutely deploy, and I would deploy relatively quickly because of the people I was talking to in my unit and everything. They're like, yeah, everybody's pretty much on a uh 9 months to a year long schedule going on deployments and stuff. So I was rearing to go overseas, and that's pretty much why I joined. Like by the time I was 15, I knew
What
about the Taliban, and I wanted to go make a difference by taking
what
it to
year
the
did
enemy.
you,
Hmm.
sorry, what year did you join, just for context?
20 14
Okay.
was when I joined the reserves as a 17-year-old. And then I actually went active duty 2016 because there's this whole year-long time lapse in there where I was the day I was supposed to ship to basic training, um, I came down with pneumonia. And I had the symptoms of pleurisy where the lining between the lungs dries up and you start hyperventilating and you're in a lot of pain. So that's why I went to the ER. So my recruiter was texting me like, "Hey, I'm picking you up, take you to the airport." And my dad was responding for me while I was in the ER getting a chest x-ray and all this stuff. Like, "Hey, he's not going anywhere. He's in the ER." And then they dropped me. I had been going to a unit in the reserves for a year with a unit. I already had uniforms. I had an ID. I had dog tags, and I had never been to basic training. And to this day, everybody I tell that story, even recruiters and stuff, they're just like, how did this even happen? And it messed up my paperwork to the point where even when I separated a couple of years ago, they were not counting my time in service correctly. Like it was a whole long thing because what happened is
Oh yeah.
I signed the contract when I was 17 in 2014, so my time in service began. The clock started, but they dropped me off because I never even went to basic training. They dropped me off like I had never signed any contracts. And then a year later, when I finally got my chest x-ray that showed that I was good, went into the recruiter. That was the only requirement stopping me. Once I got that good to go, I signed a new contract in 2016, and that's when the big army was
Oh,
like, that's when this guy joined the military. That's when he
oh,
started. But
boy.
they wouldn't even let me do a normal, like at the time I wanted to go Rangers, so it was called a what is it, 11 X-ray contract.
Mm-hmm.
So you join and you get to right after boot camp, you get to go to airborne school and then you get to go to the Ranger assessment program. And they wouldn't let me because I was technically prior service. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm not prior service. I never even went to basic training. And anyway, so that's the crazy story there that they were treating me like I was prior service, but I was just a 17-year-old that was really proactive, like overly proactive. Because the day I showed up as a 17-year-old to my unit, I was so gung ho and excited to be there. They got me uniforms issued. They got me a cat card because I wanted to start doing the online trainings that the unit was doing. I didn't want to just be sitting there. So they got me all sorts of set up, and I was already used to the military and everything, the feel of like showing up to a formation, and I was already used to all that because I'd been doing it in the Civil Air Patrol. I knew how to fall into a formation and everything. So they had no idea. They just kind of treated me like like I was just another guy who had been a soldier. And it was crazy because all of that ultimately came to the conclusion that when I tried to when I tried to join again, they were like, "Oh, you're prior service." Anyways,
Oh, that's just ridiculous. You're like, dude, I'm freaking 18. How can I be prior service?
yeah, exactly.
Like,
But that,
logically, use your brain here. Look at my birth date.
yeah, and that ultimately,
Oh
because I
man.
didn't get the Ranger contract, they just basically gave me a standard infantry option contract. So you're going to go to basic training, and then you're going to go to infantry one station unit training, and then from there you're going to be needs of the army. So if they need you in a mounted unit, you'll go there. If they need you in an airborne unit, you'll go there. If you
Yeah.
perform well, you get really high PT scores and stuff, maybe you can get picked up and go to the Ranger assessment when those guys show up to grab a few guys. Um, but
Oh.
this is all kind of backstory to one thing I wanted to discuss in this conversation, and that is that because some of those questions you had sent me were referencing advice to people joining or to people separating. And one of the things I was going to talk about was your source of fulfillment when it comes to service. And like the answer, I guess, to the question you asked me is, why did you join the military? Well, the simple answer is because I wanted to serve my country. I wanted to serve it in the fullest capacity. To me, that meant being the soldier, like what you envision a soldier doing, going on the front lines with a rifle. Like that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be because I know there's a tons of jobs in the army. There's tons of jobs. You could basically get any job in the military that you could find in the outside, in the civilian sector. But I wanted to do the army, like I wanted to do the soldier thing. I wanted to be the guy with the weapon, and the flag, and I wanted to, go fight the enemy. At the time, I thought the enemy was the Taliban. And so I was like, I'm gonna go kill the Taliban with a rifle, with a platoon. That's what I wanted to do. Um, and that kind of comes full circle to going to Afghanistan years later with a platoon with my rifle, and ultimately coming to the conclusion that yes, this is a piece of making a difference. This is I'm one part of a big machine, the big green machine, that's accomplishing a big mission. But there's so many ways to serve, and that's when I was on the other side of the world at the epitome of what I thought the most you could possibly do was I thought the epitome of serving your country was being a soldier on the front lines. That's what I thought. And then I was a soldier on the front lines and I was over there and I look back and I see no, there's firefighters, there's police officers back there. There's my dad who's just an electrician in his community doing the best he can, being a good father, being a good husband. And I realized that there's heroes all across the country doing, they're serving and they're getting fulfillment from that service. And I stopped thinking in terms of black and white. And I realized, my idea of service could look so many ways. When I was over there, I was like, I could fly helicopters. That would be fun. I could my ASVAB score was actually really, really good. And they were like, why did you join the infantry? Like you could have picked any job. And, because a lot of guys will only have the option to join infantry because it's like their score was so low. But I was one of those guys that had the option to do any job. I could have picked any job and they were like, and you chose infantry. I was like, yeah, that's the whole point. I wanted to be the soldier. And man, was I in for an eye-opening experience because you got to envision me leaving home gung ho, head already shaved, going to boot camp. Most guys would go in there with their hair. I'm already shaved. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to serve my country, flag holding, head held high. And I show up and the majority of everyone I was with was they weren't there to serve their country. They were there because it was an option. It was their best option or it was a option. And I was really disappointed. I got to basic training and then I got to my unit ultimately. I was so let down. I thought I was going to be surrounded by like-minded individuals who their whole goal in life was to serve their country and to serve it in the greatest capacity. And what I was met with, and this is just the perception at the time, but what I thought I was meeting with was just a bunch of selfish, ignorant bastards. Like that's what I thought. When I showed up to my unit, I was like, "What is this? I don't belong here." In fact, I come from a family where my parents are still together. I had a family full of
Mhm.
love. I had a lot of order. I was actively, I had a positive attitude in general about, you know, whereas a lot of the guys that a lot of the people I was surrounded with when I got to my unit ultimately were really negative and they were a lot of the guys I was serving with their parents were divorced and they came from a kind of a rough background and stuff and um I started questioning why am I here, like I don't understand. I don't really fit in this group you know but over time I actually found that there was a reason why I was there and there's a reason why I somewhat you know fit in with the group because when it comes down to it everyone always has a choice, and even though it wasn't the ideal choice like it was for me, ultimately when you choose to join the military, you're choosing because ultimately you feel like it's a good decision, and that came with a lot of time just being with a lot of other service members and realizing, you know what, even if they're not thinking to the level of service that I'm envisioning, everyone in uniform is serving. And that took me years to actually come to as far as a conclusion. Um, anyways, so
No, it makes sense because there are there definitely are people like you. I've met a lot who their whole thing is like being a soldier is being a soldier. I want boots on ground. I want gun in hand. I want to look the enemy in the eye. And that's totally fine. That's the heart of the military. And that's the origin of the military. Modern military, we're slowly moving away from that being the primary.
yep,
Um, but it's important to have those people who genuinely have that drive and motivation and basically are gung ho for that because that's intimidating. That role is scary. And then there's people, my husband. I love and adore my husband. He's great. He's always wanted to be a soldier, like from the day he was like 5. He'd always told his mom he was going to be a soldier, but he's not a very aggressive person. Like he never really wanted to play competitive sports. He did band. Like he's
okay,
just not a very aggressive person. And so you look at him and be like, why are you in the military? But he's really great with technical stuff. He's been really great operational support. And that's where he really excels. And just because he's operational doesn't mean he hasn't been shot at.
right,
That happens to everyone. So it takes a certain level of courage, even if you're not a very aggressive person, to put yourself in that situation, whether you're going to be a technical, like operationals person, or you're actually in a combat role. Okay, so like I said at the beginning in the intro, I am super excited that I'm doing these long form interviews, but that means we're going to be doing excerpts instead of the full interview from here on out. I'm hoping that at some point when we switch to being able to do members content, I can release these long form interviews as member exclusive content, but we're just not to that point yet. And I'm hoping to get there eventually. I will be sharing more excerpts from Brooke's interview with y'all in the future. There are some really great things we talked about: his deployment in Afghanistan, his work with the other veterans to just be a support in their community. And I love those stories and experiences that he shared. And they feel like ones that would be appropriate to put in future episodes. So stay tuned for those coming forward. Like I said, I am working towards establishing an interview position with the Library of Congress Veteran History Project, and I am going through the steps on that, and it's pretty much looks like it's going to happen. So I'm excited for that next phase in this podcast, but I am still looking for veterans who would like to be on this podcast, whether you want to have a full interview or if you just want to talk about your experience and share advice for those in the military community, as well as military spouses. We have wonderful, amazing, compelling stories as military spouses. We accomplish more than we give ourselves credit for. And I want to highlight those amazing women, these amazing women, my fellow military spouses, and what you are doing in the community. Also, if you have resources for the military community, please reach out. Let me know. I would like to have you on the podcast. We have some fabulous news as of this week. The podcast is now being carried finally on Apple Podcast, and I'm really grateful for that. It has taken a bit to get the technical glitches figured out and get it all up and running. So please check us out on Apple Podcast. We're still on Spotify, YouTube, Audible, and all those other locations. The links will be in the description below. And please click it, stick it to the algorithm, share this, comment, subscribe. We want to get these wonderful stories and information out to as many members of the military community and veteran community as possible so that we can strengthen and uplift and build each other up. So I'm really grateful for all of your support and encouragement, and I cannot wait to share more of this interview with you in the future. As always, let's be the good that we want to see in the world. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.